the Amiga 500 Mini being released in the next few weeks, I thought it was time to show you the 25 games you should have ready on your USB stick to play on it. Yes, it comes pre-installed with 25 games, some of which make my list, some do not. To see which ones make it and which ones don't, well, sit back, relax, and let's find out as I show you the 25 games you need on your Amiga 500 Mini. Xenon 2 Mega Blast is a 1989 shoot-'em-up game developed by the BITMAP brothers and published by Imageworks for the Amiga and the Atari ST. The game is a sequel to Xenon and takes place a millennium after the previous game. The goal of the game is to destroy a series of bombs planted throughout history by the Xenites, the vengeful antagonists of the first game. The subtitle is derived from the Bomb the Bass track Mega Blast, which serves as the game's theme music. When released in 1989, Xenon 2 Mega Blast was met with critical acclaim and commercial success, with reviews praising the detailed visuals, addictive gameplay, variety of weapons, and the absolutely banging soundtrack. Frontier Elite 2 is a space trading and combat simulator video game written by David Brabham and published by GameTech in October 1993. It was released on the Amiga, the Atari ST and DOS. It was the first sequel to the seminal game Elite from 1984. Now, the thing I loved about this game is that there was no plot. Instead, the player just explored space while trading legally or illegally, carrying out missions for the military, ferrying passengers from system to system, engaging in piracy or any combination of the above. As with Elite, much of Frontier is concerned with trading. Players can buy and sell a variety of goods from food and computer parts to guns and slaves, with the aim of making as much profit as possible from each trading run. Thus, learning to compare prices in various systems is essential for profitability, and calculating overheads for each trip, such as fuel, missiles, hull repair. These are all essential skills. It has often become apparent that a particular trade route is profitable, such as the Bernard Star to the Sol route. It is worth noting that some trades, goods like narcotics, nerve gas, etc., are illegal in many systems, and attempting to trade in these can result in a fine from the police, which can often escalate into the police attacking you if not paid. However, as you can imagine, the illegal trades make you the most money. It Came from the Desert is a 1989 action-adventure game by Cinemaware. It was originally released for the Amiga, but later ported to MS-DOS as well as various consoles. As you can see by the footage, this game is inspired by dozens of 1950s monster movies, especially the 1954 mutant and classic Them, with the title referencing the 1953 horror film It Came from Outer Space. It Came from the Desert utilises different gameplay types, a hallmark of Cinemaware games. An adventure mode provides the overall structure and advances in the plot. A main action mode is used to combat and defeat the ants. A collection of minigames cover the special aspects of the narrative. Zool Ninja of the Nth Dimension is a platform game originally produced for the Amiga by Gremlin Graphics in 1992. It was later ported to several other platforms before its sequel in 1992. As you can see, this is a platform game that relies on smooth, fast-moving gameplay. Its main protagonist is Zool, a gremlin ninja from the Nth Dimension who is forced to land on Earth in order to gain a ninja ranking. He has to pass several lands, beating a boss at the end of each of them. Lemmings is a puzzle strategy video game originally developed by DMA Design and published by Psygnosis for the Amiga in 1991. It was later ported to numerous platforms. The game was programmed by Russell Kay, Mike Daly and David Jones and was originally inspired by simple animation that Daly created while experimenting with Deluxe Paint. The object of the game is to guide a group of lemmings through a number of obstacles to a designated exit. To save the required number of lemmings to win, one must determine how to assign a limited number of 8 different skills to a specific lemming that will allow the selected lemming to alter the landscape, or to affect the behaviour of other lemmings, or to clear obstacles to create a safe passage for the rest of the lemmings. Worms is a 2D artillery tactical video game developed by Team 17 and released in 1995. It's a turn-based game where the player controls a team of worms against another team of worms that are controlled by a computer or a human. The aim of the game is to use various weapons to kill the other worms on the other team and have your worms surviving last. Over 50 weapons and tools may be available for each time a game is played, and different selections of weapons and tools can be saved into a scheme for easy selection in future games. Worms was a commercial success. By March 1996, its sales had reached almost 250,000 copies following its release in November 1995. Across all of its ports, the game ultimately sold above 5 million units by 2006. UFO Enemy Unknown, or XCOM UFO Defense as it's known in America, is a 1994 science fiction strategy video game developed by Mythos Games and Microprose. It was published by Microprose for the MS-DOS Amiga computers, the Amiga CD32 console, and of course, the PlayStation. Originally planned by Julian Gallop as a sequel to Mythos Games' 1988 Laser Squad, the game mixes real-time management simulation with turn-based tactics. The player takes the role of the commander of XCOM, an international paramilitary organisation secretly defending Earth from an alien invasion. Through the game, the player is tasked with issuing orders to individual XCOM troops in a series of turn-based tactical missions. At strategic scale, the player directs the research and development of new technologies, builds and expands XCOM's bases, manages the organisation's finances and personnel, and monitors and responds to all UFO activity. XCOM was set in the near future at the time of the game's release, so the game begins in around 1998. The initial plot centres on increased reports of UFO sightings as tales of abductions and rumours of attacks by mysterious aliens become widespread. In the beginning, the player will only have access to conventional weapons, but as the game progresses, the player learns more about the enemy, their species, mutated creations and technology. The game may end in several ways. If the player's performance is poor or worse for 2 consecutive months, the player runs a deep deficit for 2 consecutive months, all the player's bases are captured, or the player mounts an assault on the aliens' Mars base and loses, the game will end in defeat. Wings is a World War I game developed and published by Cinemaware. It was released for the Amiga in 1990. The action sequences are similar in style to those of the 1927 silent film Wings. So the story goes like this. You are a new recruit in the Royal Flying Corps, which is the predecessor to the RAF. You have to earn your wings to qualify to join the 56th by completing one of 3 set training missions: bombing, strafing, and almost best of all, dogfighting. Should you qualify, your transfer comes through and you're off to the front line. Your pilot has 4 ratings. Flying, the higher this rating is, the more manoeuvrable your plane becomes. Mechanical rating determines your ability to control the plane when it's damaged or stop your guns jamming, while shooting determines how many shots it takes to down enemy planes. Stamina is the amount of damage you can take before wigging out completely. These ratings increase according to how many targets you destroy and how well you perform on the various missions. Theme Park is a construction and management simulation video game developed by Bullfrog Productions and published by EA in 1994. The player designs and operates an amusement park with the goal of making it as much money as possible and creating theme parks worldwide. The game was the first installment in Bullfrog's theme series and their designer series. The game took about a year and a half to develop, with the team aiming for as much realism as possible. Certain features including multiplayer were dropped. However, the game still sold over 15 million copies. Simon the Sorcerer is a 1993 point-and-click adventure game developed and published by AdventureSoft for the Amiga and MS-DOS. The game's story focuses on a boy named Simon, who is transported into a parallel universe of magic and monsters where he embarks on a mission to become a wizard and rescue another from evil sorcerer. The game's setting is inspired by the novels of the Discworld series and incorporates parodies on the fantasy novels and fairy tales such as Lord of the Rings, Jack and the Beanstalk. The lead character's design was inspired by that of a fictional British television actor Blackadder, with the character voiced by Chris Barry in the CD re-release. As a point-and-click adventure game, the player controls the main protagonist of the story, Simon, by using the mouse. Gameplay involves moving Simon around different locations in the game, interacting with objects and other characters at each site. The player can make Simon perform actions via verbal commands such as look at, talk to and give, with objects that are picked up being placed into an inventory. Using such items are required at the right verbal command and then selecting the target for that object. The game primarily involves talking to lots of people for information, including hints, how to solve puzzles and acquiring items, and using the correct items to solve the puzzles during the course of the game. Another World is a 1991 cinematic platform action-adventure game designed by Eric Chahi and published by Delphine Software. The game tells a story of Lester, who is a young scientist who, as a result of an experiment that's gone wrong, finds himself in a dangerous alien world where he's forced to fight for his survival. Another World was innovative in its use of the cinematic effects in both real-time and cutscenes, which earned the game praise amongst critics and commercial success. It also influenced a number of other video games and designers, inspiring titles such as Eco, Metal Gear Solid, Silent Hill, and of course, Flashback. The protagonist of the game is Lester Knight Shaken, a young physicist. In the opening cinematic, Lester arrives in a high-tech underground laboratory in his Ferrari 288 GTO during a thunderstorm and goes to work on his experiment using a particle accelerator, attempting to reconstruct what happened when the universe was born. However, before the particles are intended for their destination, a lightning bolt strikes the laboratory and interferes with the accelerator, causing an unforeseen particle fusion and explosion, opening a hole in time and space, teleporting Lester to a barren alien planet. After evading a number of dangerous indigenous animals, Lester is captured by a race of humanoid aliens and taken to a subterranean prison camp. Lester escapes along with an alien captive known as Buddy, and the two must evade capture while travelling through a series of dangerous environments, battling alien soldiers and wild creatures, while solving numerous puzzles in order to survive. Another World is a platform game featuring a control scheme where the player uses either the keyboard, joystick or gamepad to make the protagonist run, jump, attack and perform other situation-specific actions such as rocking a cage backwards and forward. In the initial part of the game, the player's character Lester is unarmed. He is able to kick out at small creatures but is otherwise defenceless until later in the game he acquires a pistol from a fallen foe. Flashback is a 1992 science fiction cinematic platform game developed by Delphine Software of France and published by US Gold in the United States and Europe, and Sunsoft in Japan. Originally this game was advertised as a CD-ROM game on a cartridge. The game features a fully hand-drawn backdrops and all animation is retroscoped, giving movements an unusual fluidity, similar to that of the earlier Prince of Persia. The game was a commercial and critical success and was listed in the Guinness World Records as the best-selling French game of all time. The game is set in the year 2142 and you play the part of Agent Conrad B. Hart, who discovers that shape-shifting aliens, also known as morphs, have infiltrated human society. He records a message to himself, but before he can warn anyone else he is captured and his memory is erased. He later escapes but crash lands in his vehicle in a jungle where the gameplay begins as he drops his recorded message. If the player retrieves it, it instructs Conrad to meet his new friend Ian in New Washington. Once there, he finds Ian being attacked by police. After Conrad kills them, Ian uses the regenerator to restore his memories, a copy of which he had sent to Ian. Afterwards, Conrad is determined to return to Earth. Ian tells him the only way he can afford a ticket to Earth is to win one in Death Tower, a game show which contestants fight to the death. Stunt Car Racer, or Stunt Track Racer as it's known in the United States, is a racing video game developed by Jeff Crammond. It was published in 1989 by Microprose under the Microstyle and Microplay labels in the United Kingdom and in the United States respectively. The game differs from other racing games in that the races take place on an elevated racetrack with nothing to stop the player from accidentally driving off the side. Most racetracks in the game have gaps in them which players can fall into. If this occurs, then the player's vehicle is hoisted back into the air and back onto the track by a nearby crane, costing valuable time. Turbo can be used to make the car go faster, but it can be only used for a limited amount of time for each race. The single player game consists of a league table which is split into 4 divisions of 3 drivers each, making a total of 12 races including the human player. There are 2 racing tracks in each division, making it a total of 8 tracks in the game. The tracks in Division 4, the first division, are easy, but as the tracks get progressively more difficult and dangerous with each division. Damage to the player's car occurs when the player lands too hard on the track after driving over a crest too fast, crashes into a wall, falls into the gap or the track, or hits the opponent's car. If the damage, which is indicated by a crack in the frame at the top of the screen, reaches a certain level, the vehicle is deemed to be wrecked and the driver loses the race instantly. A particularly hard crash will also make holes representing structural damage appear in the frame above the windshield. Holes remain on the car for the rest of the season. Speedball 2 Brutal Deluxe is a 1990 video game based on a violent futuristic cyberpunk sport that draws on elements of handball and ice hockey and rewards violent play as well as goals. The concept of the game is very reminiscent of the 1975 film Rollerball. The original game was developed by the BITMAP brothers with various remakes for many platforms since being published. It is a sequel to the original 1988 game Speedball. According to the game's story, the first Speedball League was founded in 2095. That failed due to violence and corruption. As the organisation gives rise to anarchy, the game is forced underground. But 5 years later, in an attempt to gain public interest, Speedball 2 is born. The game starts in 2115 with the emergence of a new team, Brutal Deluxe. Speedball 2 makes several changes over the original Speedball. Teams have 9 players on court rather than the 5, and the targets on the floor and walls can now be hit to receive bonus points. Degeneration is an action-adventure game with puzzle elements. It was originally developed for the 8-bit Apple II during the late 1980s, but instead was published and released on the Amiga by Mindscape in 1991. The game takes place in a slightly cyberpunk futuristic setting on 2021. Degeneration's plot begins in Singapore on June the 27th, 2021. A French company called Genoc has developed a series of new genetically engineered bioweapons which have run out of control and have taken over the Singaporean lab. The main character is a courier making an emergency delivery by jetpack of an important package to one of the top researchers, Jean-Paul Derrida, and who is completely oblivious to the events inside the building until the lab's doors lock behind him after he enters. His point of delivery is 10 floors away, all of them crawling with bioweapons. Finally, we move into the top 10, and what better way to start the top 10 with Syndicate. Syndicate is an isometric real-time tactical strategy game from Bullfrog Productions, created in 1993 and was released for a variety of platforms, beginning with the PC and Commodore Amiga. It is the first title in the Syndicate series, set in a dystopian future, which corporations have replaced governments. Syndicate puts the player in control of a corporation vying for global dominance. The game consists of a series of missions in which the player controls a team of cybernetically modified agents attempting to take control of a particular country. The agents must frequently overcome local police forces and heavily armed agents from rival syndicates to achieve their mission objectives, which range from assassinations to capture or rescue of personnel. The gameplay of Syndicate involves ordering 1 to 4 person team of cyborg agents around cities displayed in a fixed isometric style, in pursuit of mission goals such as assassinating executives of a rival syndicate, rescuing captured allies, persuading civilians and scientists to join the player's company, or killing enemy agents. Championship Manager is a series of football management simulation video games, the first of which was released in 1992. However, personally I prefer the 1993 version as it goes into a little bit more detail. The release of Championship Manager 93 built on the original game and was ported to the C programming language, adding a real-life player database and other features. By now, the Championship Manager had built a large following in the UK. To this very day, I still blame Championship Manager as the main reason for me having to resit my GCSEs back in 1994. So whilst at the time not passing English or maths, it was far more important to me that I had an absolutely amazing statistical knowledge of the whole of the Premier League. At the time, that was great. Gunship 2000 is a helicopter combat flight simulation video game developed and published by Microprose as a follow-up to their earlier success, Gunship. The game, that was released in 1993, was significantly enhanced and expanded the features in the gameplay from the original Gunship. Besides improved audio, graphics, key areas of change were enhanced terrain, the ability to fly multiple helicopter types, and the ability to command a team of helicopters and their crews. Gunship 2000 utilised roughly the same format as most of the other Microprose flight simulators of the time. The player had a profile, chose their combat theatre, and either performed single missions or a campaign. The planning of your mission is a very important part of the game. Fuel consumption is unrealistically high, and the player can rarely lift off with enough fuel and the best weapons loaded. On promotion to the rank of Second Lieutenant, the player may gain control of several other helicopter wingmen whose helicopters can also be configured to the same extent as the player's. Wingmen can remain with the player or be sent off for separate tasks such as completing a secondary objective, so a great deal of flexibility is present for tactical planning. Banshee is a vertical scrolling shooter released for the Amiga 1200 and the Amiga CD32 in 1994 by Core Design. Due to the late release of this game, very few people played this when it originally came out, and of course it was only available on the Amiga 1200 and the Amiga CD32. Personally, I was always amazed this wasn't a BITMAP Brothers game. Just looking at the left hand side of the screen, you can see the similarities between this and the Chaos engine. Now, let's not beat around the bush here. This game looks absolutely stunning. Visually, it's second to none. However, do not let that fool you, because this game is really, really hard. So the year is 1999. No world wars have ever taken place. Mankind has evolved and developed into a completely different thread, and now we have finally reached the state of war. Unfortunately, technology is still quite primitive. This is where a biplane comes in handy. And not many people are actually that skilled at fighting. Enter you, ace pilot extraordinaire, to save the day. Set over 4 levels with increasing difficulty, Banshee starts out with the familiar 1942 landscape of sea and beaches, but soon evolves into towns and cities, deserts, snowscapes, swamps, and eventually a high-tech war zone where everything is thrown at you. Turrican 2 The Final Fight is the second game of the Turrican series. The game, developed by Factor 5, was released in 1991 for the Commodore Amiga. This version was finished before the Commodore 64 version, but Manfred Trenz cites the 64 version is the original design. The game is set in 3025. For decades of peace, freedom and the rule of law in the galaxy have been enforced by the United Planet's Freedom Forces. The United Planet ship, the Avalon 1, is drifting through the outer reaches of the known universe when Colonel Arden C. Stryker and his crew are preparing for the final passage through the barrier of the galaxy. Turrican 2 can be described as a cross between Metroid and Psycho Nick's Oscar. While the huge detailed labyrinth levels and morphball functions were inspired by Metroid, the overall graphics and design weapons were inspired by Psycho Nick's Oscar, while the spaceship shoot-em-up levels were inspired by Kaneko's Airbuster. The game is divided into 5 distinct worlds, split across 11 levels, each with its own theme music provided by Chris Husselbeck, plus a final showdown with the boss known as The Machine. There is a music menu accessible by pressing the spacebar in the Amiga version, where all the in-game music is available to be listened to. The music to Turrican 2 is widely regarded as one of Husselbeck's best compositions and was performed live by an orchestra in the 2nd Symphonic Game Music Concert in 2004. Beneath the Steel Sky is a 1994 cyberpunk science fiction point-and-click adventure game developed by British developer Revolution Software and published by Virgin Interactive Entertainment for the Amiga home computers. Set in a dystopian future, the player assumes the role of Robert Foster, who was stranded in a wasteland known as the Gap as a child and adopted by a group of local Aboriginals, gradually adjusting to his life in the wilderness. After many years, armed security officers arrive, killing the locals and taking Robert back to Union City. He escapes and soon uncovers the corruption which lies at the heart of society.
The Grand Tour is classy, see? You'll be mixing with people of
Beneath the Steel Sky is a 2D adventure game played from a third-person perspective. The player uses a point-and-click interface to interact with the environment and to guide the protagonist Robert Foster around the game's world.
It's full of biscuits and dog drool.
To solve puzzles and progress in the game, the player must collect items that may be combined with one another and used in the environment, or given to non-playable characters. The Chaos Engine is a top-down run-and-gun video game developed by the BITMAP brothers and published by Renegade Software in March 1993. The game has 6 playable characters. This is a 2-player game, of course, so you can choose one each. The Navi and Thug are the strongest and most expensive of the group. They have the highest health and most destructive specials, but are slower than the other characters. The Brigand and the Mercenary are all-rounded characters and have a mid-range price. Though they are slightly weaker than the Navi and Thug, they have access to more specials and can move faster. The Gentleman and the Preacher, or the Scientist if you're playing outside of the UK, well, they're the least expensive, with the highest movement speed, widest selection of specials. However, they have the lowest health. The game is set in a steampunk Victoria age in which one or two players must battle against the hostile creations of the eponymous Chaos Engine across 4 landscapes and ultimately defeat it and its deranged inventor. The players must traverse through each level, picking power-ups, gold and keys to pass through the various puzzles and mazes. A number of nodes must be activated via weapon fire or special power to open the final doors at the end of each level. At the end of every second level, the player has a chance to spend their collected riches and upgrade their weapons, increase the number of hit points of the character, purchase new items and improve other character attributes. On a personal note, this game for me has the best music of any Amiga game, and that really is saying something with the amount of choice that's out there.
Exit open. Level complete.
The sequel to the Chaos Engine was released in 1996. Unfortunately, this game did not live up to anything like the original. Cannon Fodder is a shoot-'em-up developed by Sensible Software and published by Virgin Interactive Entertainment for the Amiga in 1993. The game is military themed and based on shooting action with squad-based tactics. The player directs troops through numerous missions, battling enemy infantry, vehicles and installations. Cannon Fodder has a darkly humorous tone, which commentators variously praised and condemned. Its creators intended it to convey an anti-war message, which some reviewers recognised, but the Daily Star and a number of public figures derided the game. The player controls a small squad of up to 5 soldiers. These soldiers are armed with machine guns which kill enemy infantry with a single round. The player's troops are similarly fragile, and whilst they possess superior firepower at the game's outset, the enemy infantry becomes more powerful as the game progresses. As well as foot soldiers, the antagonists include vehicles such as jeeps, tanks and helicopters, as well as missile-armed turrets. The player must also destroy buildings which spawn enemy soldiers. For these targets, which are invulnerable to machine gun fire, the player must utilise a secondary explosive weapon. The Secret of Monkey Island is a 1990 point-and-click graphic adventure game developed and published by Lucasfilm Games. It takes place in a fictional version of the Caribbean during the age of piracy. The player assumes the role of Guybrush Threepwood, a young man who dreams of becoming a pirate and explores fictional islands while solving puzzles. The game was originally conceived in 1988 by Lucasfilm employee Ron Gilbert, who designed it with Tim Schafer and Dave Grossman. Gilbert's frustrations with the contemporary adventure titles led him to make the player's character's death almost impossible, which meant the gameplay focused more on exploration. The Secret of Monkey Island was the 5th game built with the SCUM engine, which was heavily modified to include a more user-friendly interface. This is a 2D adventure game, played from a third-person perspective. Via a point-and-click interface, the player guides the protagonist Guybrush Threepwood through the game's world and interacts with the environment by selecting 12 verb commands. While conversing with other characters, the player may choose between topics for discussion that are listed in a dialogue tree. The game is one of the first to incorporate such a system. Sensible World of Soccer was designed and developed by Sensible Software as the 1994 sequel to their original 1992 game Sensible Soccer, which combined a 2D football game with a comprehensive manager mode. The game includes a contemporary season data of all professional clubs from around the world, with a total number of 1,500 teams and 27,000 players. This game is a simple must-own for Amiga football lovers, and rightly takes its place at the top. Well, that's my 25 What would be different about your 25? For more videos like this and more, please consider subscribing to my channel, and if you enjoyed this video, please give it a like. Thanks for watching. Now I'm away to play Championship Manager to get Sunderland out of the 3rd Division. Well, we can all dream after all.